Hello everyone, Stormy here, and welcome back to another UnityXR tutorial. So this one is going to be the third tutorial in our custom hand series, and this time I'm going to be showing you guys the animation overhaul I did that allows me to put even more hand animations on this character. So now I've got things like thumbs up and finger gun and a whole bunch of new animations that I couldn't do before with just the simple blend tree to pointer finger swap that I was doing. I've created a whole new system, and it allows me to continuously add more animations if I want to, and it's super easy, and that's what we're going to see today. So let me head back into the editor and I'll show you what's cooking. Alrighty, now we're back in the editor, and I'm going to show you guys real quick how our new hand animators work. So we have one of these for each hand. There we go. So we now have, rather than just the two states, the main blend and the pointer blend, we now actually have 4 states that we can choose between using a pose integer variable that we set up in the parameters over here. We've got the main blend, which has the regular 4 poses that we talked about in the first tutorial. Then we've got the pointer blend, which was set up in the second tutorial. And now we also have a finger gun blend and a thumbs up pose. So those are being switched between all of these different sections via this pose integer variable. And every time that changes number, it just goes to a different one. You can see I've got pose 0, pose 1, pose 2, and then pose 4. We're not actually using pose 3 right now. I'm going to implement that later. But for right now, we've got these 4, and then we have a hub state. The hub state is what it goes to right when the hand turns on, and then it looks for what pose we're currently in, and then it sends our animation there so that we don't have a funky glitch at the beginning of our animation. This is being controlled by our pointer pres script. So this is what we set up in the last tutorial, and it is controlling all of our variables related to our hand animations. So I'm going to go over them real quick. I added a bunch of descriptions so that they're easier to understand, and we're just going to look at them real quick now. We've got a couple of new animator variables here. We've got the trigger float value, the grip float value, gripped, trigger touch float, trigger touched, joy touch, and custom anim. Custom anim isn't being used right now, but it'll be implemented later for custom animations like holding the bowling ball. And then we have all of these here, which are related to the buttons on the controller that they are referencing. So we're going to go in here, and that custom anim is being set to false. And that's just important because otherwise it'll run some code down below that I don't need running yet. And then we have the try initialize void, which is just setting up the hand models. And then we have void update trigger values. This uses the void to set public variables, which are these up here, for the values of the trigger and grip trigger. So if I open this real quick, you can see we're getting internal variables, and then we are setting them to the public variables we made up above, and then we are setting the hand animator values based on the internal variables as well. So that is going to allow our blends to check for how much the trigger and the grip trigger are pressed in, and it does it for both of those. Then we have update pointer. This void is used to update the public variables tracking the index finger's position. So if we look in here, we're again getting a internal variable, and we are checking to see if the trigger touch float, which is that internal variable, is greater than 0. If it is, then we're setting be trigger to true. We don't really need that anymore, but I left it in there just in case we want to use it later. And then we're setting trigger touched to true, and if it is not greater than 0, we're setting that to false. If we are not touching it, then we are setting trigger touch to false and be triggered to false. So that's just, those two are essentially the same. It's just easier to put in an else there just in case. And that is just the index finger, and that will update the stuff that allows us to then check for the pointer finger animation. Then we are doing update thumb. This void is used to update public variables tracking the thumb's position on the joystick. So if we look at this, you'll see we're again getting that touch for the primary 2D axis, which is the joystick, and we're outputting a internal variable, Then if that internal variable is true, we're setting our public variable to true, otherwise we're setting that public variable to false. Then we've got our void update pose. This is the main animation void, and it uses the public variables set previously to choose a pose for each hand. So we're going to come in here, and it's going to check if the thumb is on the joystick. If it's not, then we're going to do custom animations. If it is, then we're going to do either the main blend or the pose for the pointer finger. If we don't have the thumb on the joystick, then it's going to check and see if the trigger and the grip trigger are almost fully pressed down. If it is, then it's going to do the thumbs up pose here. If the trigger for the index finger is not being touched, but gripped is true, meaning that we've almost fully pulled down on the grip trigger, then it's going to do the finger gun pose instead. And if neither of those is true, then it's just going to reset us to the main blend pose. And that means that our grip trigger isn't pressed in, or we don't have our thumb in the place for another animation. And then again, down here, if our fingers are on the joystick, then it's going to do those two main ones. So we're going between 4, 2, and 0, and then 1 and 0 there. So that's going to set our finger animations appropriately. And then we have the 3 custom voids I made down here for choosing the bowling ball animations. Again, we're not using that yet, but in the future, once I figure out how to get from an object being grabbed what hand is grabbing it, then I'll be able to send from that object back to my hand what pose it should be in, and then I'll be able to set it to the correct animation for each object, which will be cool. And then in our update void, we do a couple of things, and then down here is what was changed for this time. We are now adding in that pointer, that thumb, and that pose void that we just set up there. And that we have to have the pointer update and the thumb update before the pose update, so that we get the new values for each frame before we update the pose for that frame. So that is all that was changed for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed this short tutorial on how to add more poses to your custom VR hands. And until next time, I'll see you in the field, agents.